Good morning, Warzone kids. It's a chilly day on the trail to the Western Lands here in the Vermont section. It's 11 degrees. Warzone kids is my term for those of us like myself. I'm a child sex abuse survivor who grew up in an atmosphere that's more like a guerrilla war against your psyche, your soul, than it was a supportive nursery. I think of our psyche, our soul, our self as like a Jenga tower. That game that you play that starts off with a block of wood that's made up of a lot of smaller blocks. At the beginning of the game, it's solid, a solid cube like the Borg. And with every turn, you take off a piece from somewhere in there and you set it on the top. Now, a war zone childhood is a childhood where harm, abuse, and neglect over a period of years takes pieces off the bottom of that Jenga tower and puts them on the top. Now, by the time you reach adulthood as a Warzone kid, your Jenga tower looks like it does toward the end of the game. It's a tall, swaying, unsteady thing ready to fall down at a moment's notice. Can't even look at it hard. Don't take a hard step, don't breathe in its direction or it'll fall down. And if you're anything like this Warzone kid, your Jenga tower has fallen down in life any number of times. As an adult, I live with borderline personality disorder. I'm a recovering addict and bulimic. And I see life as a pilgrimage on the trail to the Western Lands. Western Lands, just what I think of a place of peace and wholeness, where I learn and become what I am. And a pilgrimage is a journey which itself is a devotion. The way to the Western Lands is, in a very real way, the Western Lands themselves. For this guy, for this pilgrim. And I've always been a philosophically minded guy. I studied philosophy in college as a humanist. I'm a human being interested in the human things. And the only question in philosophy that matters is how do we live? How do we live? And as a child sex abuse survivor, I'm very familiar with the concept of vulnerability and what it means in life to be there for other people. The strong do what they will, and the weak suffer what they must. That's what the Greek historian called Thucydides, and that's what he said. He didn't say it as a prescription for how you should live. He said it as an observation for what he saw going on around him. Look, the strong do what they will, and the weak suffer what they must. And as a Warzone kid, I suffered what I must. And I developed a psyche and a Jenga tower that got me here talking to you to deal with it. And how do we live is a question much on my mind as a Warzone kid right now. I'm 51 years old. I'm a Gen Xer from Oklahoma. And how do I live is a question that's much on my mind. And in this book that I'm revising, if I don't get any interest from an agent or a publisher, I'll put it out myself in a couple of months, and I'll be calling on you to buy a copy and listen to a copy. I'm going to record the audiobook. It's called A Pilgrim's Progress, Letters from the Trail to the Western Lands. It's letters back and forth from a couple of pilgrims. Both of them are versions of me on the trail to the Western Lands. And they find obstacles and hurdles, trials, aporia. That's a roadblock, Greek word for roadblock, aporia. They find roadblocks on their trail to the Western Lands that they have to get through them. They find the Grail Woods. They find the Turpentine Toddler. They find the Canyon of the Furies. They find the Fiery Wigwam. These are all other videos I've made. Go to my channel on YouTube at Trail to the Western Lands. I got them in order on a playlist with names. And I got them here on TikTok. Like, subscribe, and follow. I'd love that. Leave me a comment. I'd love to hear what you think. Well, where we are now on the trail to the Western Lands, pilgrim, is a big one. It's a big, fat aporia, big, fat roadblock took this pilgrim a long, long time to get to the other side of. It's called the wood between the worlds. I don't know how many videos it'll take to get through this one. Maybe just one, I don't know. The wood between the worlds. We're bringing two things together. We're bringing the story of Narcissus, and we're bringing the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. My mother, foreshadowing, my mother read me the Narnia books many times when I was a child. And I love those books. They are a most bizarre blend of Christianity with kind of Englishness. C.S. Lewis was, for this guy, about as English as they come. An Oxford Don, I think that's probably the right word to call him. Professor at Oxford. Very English. And his version of the Western lands, I'll call it. I mean, Narnia is a place that's half Christian and half English. I mean, you got kings and queens, you got lions, you got talking beasts, and all the talking beasts are either of like the English woodland variety, like hedgehogs and stouts, which I think is a kind of weasel, rabbits and whatnot, or else they're from the Greek and Roman mythology. You got winged horses, you got centaurs, you got fawns, mostly Roman stuff. Anyway, and he's got a sequence in there, a place in there called the wood between the worlds. And it's like a manicured kind of English forest. The travelers go in there and there's a bunch of pools of water. And they got these magic rings that we don't have to care about. But they got these magic rings and they got to jump in these pools of water. And they disappear through the pools of water and they reappear in like a fictitious, mythical world. You know, there's different worlds, presumably, a different world for every pool of water. And they got to find the right one. They got to find the right pool of water to jump in. That's the wood between the worlds. And now we got Narcissus. People, man, we live... What dumber thing than a person could say that within in 2026 we live in a weird world. But the weirdest thing to me this morning is the fact that you see a lot about narcissism these days. You hear a lot about narcissistic abuse. Believe me, I am well familiar with that. My maternal organism suffered from what today would be called narcissistic personality disorder and borderline, and probably some of the other ones, just like this guy. More foreshadowing. I know narcissistic abuse. And we hear a lot about narcissists and how to identify them and all that. And narcissists are definitely the other in our world. They're one of the others, you know, because you hear the word toxic a lot. Well, if toxic means anything, it means that you touch something and it gets in your blood, it gets in your skin, it poisons you. And people talk a lot about narcissistic abuse, and they will use the word toxic. And I could not think of a better word to use, because it is a feature of being around a person that suffers from a lot of narcissism, that it's infectious. We'll get to the reasons why. But it's toxic. It tends to spread to you, because it is a characteristic trait of a person suffering from in the throes of narcissism, that they use everyone around them to keep their bubble alive. And at the same time, so we live in that world, there's a lot of talk about it, and it's probably for the good. But the world we live in with social media, like the kind I'm talking to on right now, is a recipe for enhancing your own sense of narcissism and my own sense of narcissism. The degree to which you kind of go through the world thinking that what you are is whatever you can get other people to think you are. That's one of the characteristic elements of narcissism. That your identity as a human being is whatever you can get other people to believe it is. You create a persona on social media, and if you can get a lot of people to believe it, that's what you are in that way of thinking. So that's real interesting for you. We using ingredients that build narcissism in our own soul, we hear and think all about narcissism in others. Let me tell you how much you can do about narcissism in someone else. Nothing. They can find their way out, but not because you did something about it. All you can do is kind of protect yourself if you're on a toxic person. And I say this as a guy who has been that kind of toxic person to one degree or another for different periods of my life. Nothing can fix that from the outside. And the person suffering from that can fix it from the inside, but they have to do the fixing. And that's what the wood between the worlds is about. Because the story of Narcissus in Greek mythology is this. Narcissus was a beautiful young fella, and he had a girlfriend called Echo. And Narcissus found his way into the woods, and he found a beautiful pool of water. And Echo was with him. And Narcissus looked in that beautiful, still pool of water. And he looked over into it, and he saw his own face. He saw his own reflection. Much the same way that we see our reflection in those around us. You create a persona, and whenever the people around you reflect that persona back to you, you see yourself, and you either like it or you don't like it. You see yourself in whatever it is people reflect back to you. And if you have a lot of narcissism in you, if the spirit of Narcissus runs strong in you, then you absolutely reject it unless it's a version of yourself that you like to see. And if the people around you reflect back to you a version of yourself which you don't want to see, you experience a feeling called narcissistic rage. And that's the rage at other people for not showing you the you that you want to see. So Narcissus leans over in that still pool of water, and he sees a beautiful reflection of himself, just as he wants to be seen. A beautiful young man, handsome, elegant, with fine features. And there's nothing in the world that he'd rather see than that reflection of himself. Sorry for these bumps in the road, it's shaky. And he can't take his eyes off that reflection of himself. Much like those around us who live in narcissism are obsessed with the version of themselves that they see reflected in those around them. And as much as they love it, that's the level of rage they feel when you don't reflect back the version of them that they want to see. That's narcissism. Narcissus looks in that pool of water, and he sees himself, and he won't take his eyes off it. He stays there all day, and it's a full moon, and that moon is shimmering down on that pool of water, and narcissism stays in it. Narcissus keeps his eyes on that pool, on his face, in the shimmery moonlight, and he stays there all night. And rosy-fingered dawn comes up in the morning, and he stays there all day. He sees himself in the slanting light of dawn, in the flat light of noon, and at the magic hour of twilight as the sun goes down. And he sees himself when the moon comes up, and he sees himself when the moon goes down, and he sees himself when the sun comes up, and he sees himself when the sun goes down. And he will not leave. He will not take his eyes off that pool. And Echo calls to him, calls his own name as an echo does. Narcissus! Narcissus cannot take his eyes off the pool. Narcissus! Narcissus cannot take his eyes off the pool. The echo grows fainter as echoes do. Narcissus! He cannot take his eyes off the pool. Narcissus! He cannot take his eyes off the pool. Narcissus! 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 Narcissus. Narcissus cannot take his eyes off the pool. And the echo fades lower and lower until the echo goes silent. And the echo left Narcissus. In order to have an echo, you need something for the sound to bounce off. For the Narcissus and those among us in whom the spirit of Narcissus runs strong, for Narcissus, there is nothing outside that reflection. There is nothing for the echo to bounce off. There is no way to see the cosmos in your own reflection. There is no way to hear the echo. Narcissus stayed there. And as far as I know, Narcissus is there still. A skull staring down into the water. The moonlight reflecting off the water, taking the place of the eyes in that skull. Narcissus stays there still. Narcissus never left that pool. The echo left. The cosmos left. And Narcissus remained. That is the story of Narcissus. And for those fellow human creatures among us who suffer from narcissism, that is the story of their life. And for stretches of my life, that was the story of my life. Because, as I see it, narcissism is just a name for a certain kind of shape of Jenga tower. Different kind of childhoods create different kind of Jenga towers. I was caused a great deal of sexual harm, emotional harm, psychological harm, some physical harm, but not much. That was not much of my experience. I was caused harm by my immediate caregivers, my maternal organism, and my father. They were both war zone kids of their own, and they had very good intentions. They gave their lives to God, and they lived by it. They were people of the book. They were devout, and they were sincere. And that was the best help that they could find. But their Jenga towers, which I had a lot of close experience with, their Jenga towers stayed the shape they were right up to the present day, as best I can tell. They learned how to live with them, how to not look at them lest they fall down, don't breathe hard, don't do anything like healing, because healing generally involves that Jenga tower falling down and then getting rebuilt. And maybe their Jenga towers have fallen down, but they've just looked at them on the floor. They just looked at those pieces laying around, never touched them. Narcissism for this guy is just the shape, a certain kind of shape of a certain kind of Jenga tower. And I think the ingredients are an utterly vaporized. The kind of experience I think that leads to that kind of Jenga tower is a childhood in which who you really were was nothing but trouble. Anytime you came into contact with your actual self, your authentic self, whatever you want to call it, your ego, yourself, your psyche, the true you, that brought you nothing but harm. And that was beaten, trampled, maimed, and withered into a little nub of itself. And the only way you're able to find any kind of tolerable life as a child in that environment is to create an image of yourself and to get to people around you to believe that image. The only way I found any peace as a child was by to invent a Ben that was the Ben that my folks wanted to see, that they approved of, that would reflect back to them their own identity as a good mother and a good father. They wanted so much to transcend the pain of their childhoods that it hurt them. They wanted that more than they wanted anything else. And they had a child. And they thought that if their child could be a happy child, that would mean that they had transcended the pain and the wounds of their own war zone psyches, their own Jenga towers. And so my job in life was to reflect themselves back to themselves. If I showed them that I was a good, happy child, then to them, they saw a reflection of their own healed psyches. Does that make sense? If I was a happy child, then that meant that they were able to transcend their own war zone childhoods and give me a good childhood. You see that dynamic? So when they looked at me, what they saw was a reflection of themselves. When I was happy and when I was the way they wanted me to be, what they saw was that they had overcome their childhoods. And when I wasn't the way they wanted me to be, they experienced narcissistic rage because they were good. They were good parents because they had worked so hard to overcome their childhoods. They had. But what is their child doing? Acting like he's not happy. Acting like he's just a regular kid with a regular psyche trying to live. What's he doing acting like that? We didn't raise you to be like that. See? And on top of that, when you're acting unconsciously, this is something my shrink has told me over and over again, when you're acting unconsciously, you'll use everyone around you for everything you need. You'll use people around you to fill your psychic needs. And their overriding psychic need was to see that they had a good, perfect child who could reflect back to them that they were good people who would overcome their past. So who I was brought me nothing but pain and suffering. So I learned not to be who I was. I learned to create a bend that would keep them happy. I had a bend for my old man. I had a bend for my maternal organism. And I learned, create a bend that'll keep the people around you happy. Different bends for different people. I had one that I could do when my folks were at the same time and place, both looking at me at the same time. I had to reflect each one of them back to themselves. That was hard. I could never do it. That's part one of this. And that's the wood between the worlds, Narcissus and Narnia, and the Jenga-towered psyche that comes into adulthood with nothing more important than being able to get the people around you to think that you are whatever it is that they needed to see. And I'll be back in a minute with part two. It's a beautiful day on the trail, pilgrim. Look away from the pool. Look at the cosmos around you. It's beautiful. And there ain't nothing to see in that pool but a skull. It's a beautiful day, pilgrim. Daylight's burning. Let's get a move on.